Can't let nobody tell you what you can't be or what position you gonna be in or what position you in. Cause shit, we come from nothing. If that's the case, we won't even be here.
Mac, what up? Camouflage assassin. Yo, hopefully next time I come through, man, you be able to come to the joint, my brother. You got a lot of love for me, man. I appreciate that, man. Word is born. Hold your head, man. Now I mean, welcome home. Settle in. Brand new world for you, man. Alright? Start everything from the beginning right here, man. Blessings, my brother. Appreciate the love.
It doesn't matter what part of New Orleans you're from, uptown, downtown, or the east. There's one universal truth that any stepper, D-boy, or anyone who know anything about the street life never under no circumstances go into Jefferson Parish or St. Tammany Parish and commit a crime. There isn't a hustler in our city who doesn't know this rule. Jefferson Parish, that's Harry Lee territory, known for its blatant racism and stringent laws that gear towards blacks. Should I remind you of the white t-shirt arrest order by Harry Lee, who once said anyone wearing a white t-shirt is considered a drug dealer and is to be arrested on sight.
We gonna full of. You think we shoved the cocaine up his ass? That's where it was found. He put it there. We didn't know it was there. The nurse found it once you were putting the thermometer in there, and it came out.
Then there's St. Tammany Parish, aka St. Slammany, widely known to make examples of anyone from Orleans Parish who dared to venture into its territory with the assumption of doing misdeeds. If you were caught in any of these parishes putting off something, the hammer will come down hard and fierce. But unfortunately, more times than we dare to admit, black kids who are innocent of any wrongdoing frequently get jammed into their system and suffer draconian and Jim Crow laws that these parishes abide by simply because they dare to cross the parish line, especially if you're a rapper who may influence the youth of that parish to start behaving like kids in Orleans Parish. We know the case of Corey Miller, aka C. Murray, but there's another case that was even worse crime of misjustice. Rapper McKinley Phipps Jr, aka Mac. Today, we're going to deep dive into the egregious miscarriage of justice that took away 21 years of a man's life, a promising rising rapper who is on his way to be the face of No Limit. McKinley Phipps Jr, born July 30, 1977, better known simply as Mac, is an American rapper from New Orleans' Third Ward. He began rapping as a child, releasing his debut album, The Lyrical Midget, at the age of 13 in 1990. Under the stage name Lil Mac. Mac would eventually sign with Master P's No Limit Records and would grow to be one of the most critically acclaimed artists on the label, both as a solo rapper and as a member of the supergroup 504 Boys. Mac released 2 solo albums and 1 album as part of the 504 Boys on No Limit, including 1998's Shell Shock, which peaks at number 11 on the US Billboard 200. In the early 90s, Lil Mac joined Psycho Ward, a New Orleans-based group consisting of 28 rappers, and the group released their debut album, www.psychoward.com, in 1997. After rejecting an offer to move to New York and sign with Def Jam Records, Lil Mac changed his name to simply Mac and signed with Master P's No Limit Records. He toured with No Limit throughout the US and Europe and made guest appearances on many of the other artists' albums before releasing his own. He was featured on Master P's Ghetto Deep, Mystical's Unpredictable, and Mia X's Unladylike, among others.
On February 21, 2000, Phipps was scheduled to perform at Slidell, Louisiana nightclub Club Mercedes, but a fight broke out before the show that resulted in a gunshot that struck and killed 19-year-old Baron C. Victor Jr. after Victor attempted to break up the fight. Phipps was arrested and charged with second-degree murder of Victor. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 30 years in prison on September 21, 2001. He would serve his sentence at the Elaine Hunt Correctional Center in Louisiana. Days into the police investigation, Thomas Williams, a man who was working security that night at the club, confessed to shooting Victor after another patron charged him with a beer bottle. Despite this, police pursued charges against Phipps.
In December 2014, Northwestern University's Medill Justice Project, in partnership with The Lens, published the results of a 3-month investigation of Phipps' conviction revealing that a key eyewitness at his trial gave his private investigator an affidavit in 2013 that stated she was coerced into identifying Phipps as the shooter because of investigators' threats to charge her. Following Medill's investigation, David Lohr of the Huffington Post published the results of a 4-month review of Phipps's conviction, further revealing that 4 other witnesses to the shooting told the publication that they also were threatened, intimidated, or outright ignored by investigators. Phipps's family has since obtained affidavits from many of the individuals in an effort to get him a new trial.
Phipps really didn't want to perform on the night of February 20, 2000. The 22-year-old had just returned from doing shows in Mississippi and was about to embark on another tour. He was scheduled to perform at a hole-in-the-wall venue, Club Mercedes in Slidell, Louisiana, about 90 minutes east of where he was living in Baton Rouge. Mac was asleep when his dad, Phipps Sr., came to get him to go to the show. "I think about that moment all the time," Phipps Sr. said. "I remember him sleeping and thinking I could just let him sleep. I felt so guilty about waking him up." When Phipps woke up, he decided to go ahead and perform. After all, he owed it to his fans. And there were plenty of them. Mac, or Lil Mac, as he was known as a kid, was a New Orleans rap prodigy and one of hip-hop's first child stars. A product of the Broadmoor neighborhood in Uptown, Mac started writing rhymes in the 80s, battling other kids and adults in the neighborhood. Victory at a local talent show landed him a deal with Yo Records, where at the age of 13 he'd release his album The Lyrical Midget, produced by then relatively unknown Manny Fresh in 1990. By the late 90s, New Orleans was becoming the unlikely rap capital of the world, thanks to the business acumen of Master P and his No Limit Records roster of Mia X, C Murder, Mystical, and the California transplant Snoop Dogg. Master P was scooping up talent across the city, and Mac was a top free agent. By 1996, he was an official member of No Limit Records, the hottest label in America. Artistically, though, the move didn't make a lot of sense. The rapper was raised on Rakim. "He was my first professor," Mac says, and sounded like a New York transplant, layering complex rhyme patterns to tell every man's stories about growing up in New Orleans. Mac's flow, cadence, and subject matter earned him an unofficial nickname from his fans, Down South Nas or New Orleans Nas, a comparison to the Queensbridge MC known for his classic Illmatic album. Mac's debut album for No Limit, 1998's Shell Shocked, presented a shift to an MC that fell more in line with the label's street-influenced music, highlighting gun violence, drug use, and misogyny, and it was a success. The album debuted at number 11 on the Billboard charts, peaked at number 4 and went gold. It looked like Mac could be the future of the label. One day, Mac went to the tiny house in New Orleans where his parents and younger siblings, Chad, Tiffany, Tybra, Jeremy, and Joshua lived, and drove them to Baton Rouge, where many of the No Limit rappers were staying. He showed his siblings a house with a pool in the back and let them shoot hoops on the basketball court and play the NBA Hangtime arcade game. "Y'all like this house?" Mac asked. His siblings roared in approval. "Well, we live in here now." But by 2000, Mac had grown frustrated with his No Limit deal, disappointed by the performance of his second album, World War III. He wanted to get back to the music he loved before he joined and launch his own label with his family as his prime helpers. That's why on the night of the Club Mercedes show, his mother was working the door, and his dad and Chad were inside to make sure things ran smoothly. They kissed the younger kids goodbye and went to the show that changed everything. According to witnesses, a fight broke out on the dance floor during the show. In the midst of the fight, a gunshot was heard, prompting people to run to the exits. But Mac says he stayed behind to look for his mother. Many who weren't close to the fracas said they weren't sure the noise they heard was an actual gunshot or a gunshot sound effect from the No Limit music the DJ was playing. Mac, who says he didn't see the fight start, pulled out a gun he kept for self-defense. "Man, we in New Orleans, shit happens." The gun was for protection. Though he says he never fired the gun, witnesses saw him holding it and pointing it toward the ceiling. When Mac found out his mother was already outside, he and most of his crew left. His dad stayed behind, though, and saw 19-year-old Baron Victor Jr. on the ground, bleeding. He'd been shot in the arm. A nursing student was tending to the wound. She told Phipps Sr. that Victor would be fine, so he left too, trailing behind Mac and the rest.
The show, Mac and his family went back to the house in Baton Rouge. They discussed that they needed to work better venues where the crowd wouldn't be so rowdy. They also tried to figure out what the whole fight was about in the beginning. Mac's father got himself ready for bed when he heard a lot of commotion outside the home. It was the police pulling up in multiple cars with sirens blazing surrounding the home. He quickly went outside to check what was the issue and was informed by the police that they were looking for Mac because he was involved in the shooting at the club. Mac Sr. assured the cops that Mac had nothing to do with the shooting, but they ended up cuffing Mac and brought him down to the police station. Mac was unaware that the victim who was shot had died from the injuries until the police read him his rights and put him in a jail cell.
Mac sat in the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's interrogation room bewildered. He was being questioned about a shooting he wasn't even sure had happened until he'd already left Club Mercedes. He wanted to get out of that interrogation room as fast as he could. So before he even had a lawyer present, he lied, telling detectives that he didn't have a gun on him. His main concern was a concealed weapons charge. Murder never crossed his mind. I was so confident that I was getting out of jail because I felt whoever got shot was living, he remembered. He was going to wake up and be able to tell them who shot him. So I figure I'm going home. Mac's plan fell apart when a detective informed him that the bullet that hit Victor in the arm traveled into his chest and killed him. Realizing that he was now facing a murder charge, Mac fessed up that he did have a gun. Now, his plan was to invite the police back to his home so he could show them his gun. They'd see a bullet was never discharged, and it would prove his innocence. The police returned to the Phipps family home in Baton Rouge with Mac in handcuffs. He led them to his room where Mac says they saw the gun was still fully loaded and had not been discharged. That wasn't enough for the police. They came up with this story that I must have had another weapon that I threw out of the car or something, Mac recalled. The police proceeded to tear through the house looking for a murder weapon, the family recalled. They tossed Tabra's and Tiffany's clothes out of their drawers. Joshua, who was 8, worried the cops would accidentally let his gerbils out of their cages. Jeremy, who was 10, remembers the shame of watching his school bus drive by, his classmates pointing at the cop cars. The police gathered all of the siblings and started to question them until an aunt pressed them to stop. Tybra remembers wondering who was going to clean up the mess. Then all the kids watched while Mac got walked out of the house in cuffs, his mother screaming that he was innocent. The door closed behind Mac and the police. No murder weapon was ever found, but it would be the last time the family would see him outside of prison or a courtroom for 21 years. Everyone was looking for ways to prove Mac didn't have anything to do with Victor's death. After a few days, Phipps Sr. started hearing rumors out of the Broadmoor neighborhood that someone was bragging about killing Victor. Thomas Williams, 36 at the time, had been a friend of the family and was engaged to Mac's aunt and had 2 kids with her. He helped out with security for Mac's shows, and now he was supposedly telling people he committed the shooting that put Mac in prison. Phipps Sr. arranged to meet Williams outside of a gas station. "You've got to do what's right, man," Phipps told him. "What if this was your son?" Williams told Phipps Sr. that he would confess, but he was scared. He disappeared for a few days until his conscience took over. So, with his pastor on hand, Williams went to the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office and confessed. In his videotaped statement, he said Barron was charging at me with a beer bottle, causing him to panic and shoot in self-defense. But the St. Tammany police never charged him for the killing or searched his place for the murder weapon, even after he was arrested for an unrelated firearms offense 6 months later. When they let Williams go, that's when I realized these people are going to arrest and give Mac that charge, said Sheila Phipps, Mac's mother. That's when I really realized that he's not coming home.
Answer? Yes, sir. I was working at the club and security, and a fight broke out to the left of me, and I went over to break up the fight. And after I broke up the fight, I went back forward to my post, and I looked up, and the guy was charging at me with a broken beer bottle. And I was panicked. He was to the left-hand side of the club. I was standing here. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a fight broke out. I go over to try to help, pushing people back. I pushed them out. When I looked up, this guy charging at me with a beer bottle. I just panicked. Was he black man? What? He was a black man. Yeah. I panicked. I was scared. I panicked. Yeah. How'd you react?
Here's what you need to know about St. Tammany Parish. St. Slammany has a reputation for the zeal with which former District Attorney Walter Reed pursued cases, its high conviction rates, and law enforcement's propensity for roughing up black folks. Reed was convicted of federal fraud and corruption charges in 2016 and is currently serving the remainder of a 4-year sentence at home. And Mac wasn't just any black person. He was part of a no-limit group helmed by a brash young millionaire in Master P who had bought up mansions in Baton Rouge's most exclusive neighborhood. That put a target on his back. During his trial, prosecutors harped on Mac's rap nickname, the Camouflage Assassin. They misquoted lyrics, splicing lines from 2 separate songs to say, "Murder, murder, kill, kill, you fuck with me, you get a bullet in your brain." That painted Mac as someone who promoted killing. They laid out all the guns they found at Mac's house in front of the jury without mentioning that they belonged to his father, a Vietnam veteran whose job during the war was loading weapons. The prosecution also cast doubt on Williams' confession, portraying him as a loyal member of the entourage who was willing to take the prison sentence for the bigger rap star. They also used the fact that Williams recalled being 6 to 10 feet away from Victor when he shot him, and evidence that the gunshot was fired at close range to dismiss his confession. He was never called as a witness and later pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice because his statement contradicted the coroner's report. "The DA did a damn good but devious job," Mac said. "He had me on trial, and even though I didn't have a criminal history or anything, he managed to convince these jurors that I was a monster." Still, neither Mac nor anyone in his family thought he would get convicted. He'd hired the best lawyers he could, one of whom, Jason Williams, is currently the district attorney in New Orleans. Witnesses had contradicted each other. There was no forensic evidence tying Mac to the killing. "I believe that their verdict was based on trying to appease all parties involved," Mac says now. "The DA get his conviction, the family get their justice, and this young man don't get thrown away for the rest of his life." A few weeks later, Mac was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The night of his sentencing, he cried himself to sleep. Mac went all 21 years in prison without a single write-up or reprimand. "They made me look like a monster in that courtroom, and I told myself I couldn't convince those 12 people I was innocent, so I'd convince 12 million people I'm innocent by my actions." He took to mentoring young men with the same passion he had for music, running classes to help young men cope with anger, depression, and other emotional trauma. "My mindset was always to get out," Mac said. He spent years reading through his case files looking for ways to appeal. "Being motivated by myself and my family and our hope in what would come around the corner is what kept me sane. Because I think if I would have ever just accepted the finality of being in prison, they'd have to shoot me. I would jump the fence. You know what I mean?" In 2014, the Medill Justice Project and Louisiana State University published an investigation into Mac's case. They found conflicting witness accounts. They talked to Mac's best friend and manager, Russell Baker, who said he was with Mac when the shots were fired, but was never called to testify. In 2015, the Huffington Post published a series highlighting inconsistencies in depositions and witness accounts that could have helped Mac, but were never shared with the defense. Then the verdict came, guilty of manslaughter by a 10-2 vote. Louisiana was one of 2 states to allow non-unanimous verdicts in criminal trials in 2001, a law that the Supreme Court declared unconstitutional last year. For instance, jurors heard Nathaniel Tillison, the victim's cousin, testify that he looked Mac dead in his eyes as he shot Barron. But prosecutors didn't tell Mac's lawyers about testimony from Jerry Price, who placed Tillison outside the club during the shooting. Yulon James, the nursing student who tended to Victor, testified that she saw sparks flying out of Mac's gun, but later recanted that story, telling the Huffington Post that she had been threatened by St. Tammany authorities. 4 other witnesses said they were intimidated into either testifying against Mac or staying silent about evidence that could free him. The new evidence revived the family's hopes that Mac would be exonerated. But Warren Montgomery, who was the district attorney at the time, told the Huffington Post that there was nothing new for me to look into in 2016. It became another in a long list of false starts. The ignored calls for retrials, the attempts to have the verdict overturned, and the clemency attempt that was rejected in 2016. In 2020, NPR's Louder Than a Riot podcast dedicated 3 episodes to Mac, the trial and his fight for freedom, once again bringing his story to the national stage. Still, Mac and his family persisted, sending in another appeal for clemency. And in April, Louisiana Governor John Bell Edwards granted Mac clemency. In June, he was released on parole. It's important to note that clemency is not the same as exoneration. The punishment for a crime is lowered, but he's still technically guilty. Without a legal exoneration, McKinley Phipps will always be the man convicted of killing Baron Victor Jr. Well, a decree from the state would be great, Mac said. It would be a stamp of saying that we agree that he was done wrong. But more importantly, I want to prove myself to the family of this young man who lost his life. And that has been one of the motivating factors in me walking the way I walk in prison and accepting my personal responsibility in the situation. I didn't have anything to do with this young man getting killed. I wasn't involved in the fight that eventually led to his death. But my responsibility was, this was my event. And one of my security guards killed this young man. So in essence, I failed to adequately provide a safe environment for the patrons of this event. That was my personal responsibility. And for that, I emphatically apologize to the victim of the family.